yes, we're part of NENA Eco Village, which is at Gosford. And in the Eco Village, we are creating a number of different enterprises. And one of those enterprises is an educational enterprise where we'll be offering workshops and various educational processes, because part of our mission is to be a demonstration eco village. So we'll go to the next slide. And so in our educational business, which is called Collective Know-How, next slide, please, Eilean.
Yes, sorry, guys.
This along the 4 pillars of the Global Eco Village Network, where those are economic, cultural, social, and environmental. And so that's the structure on which we are building this business. And I just need the next slide to come up.
I know you do. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Sorry, there was a bit of a muck-up. I'm just gonna start the slides again. It did work when we did it a little just a minute ago, but
it did.
It did.
No worries, Eilean. You take your time. You'll get your slides up.
Yeah, we'll get there. So yes, it was, while I'm waiting, I'll just say it's really fascinating to see the overlap between our model and the syntropic enterprise that Christine just presented. I guess you'd expect to see a fair bit of overlap, but fascinating to see different people from different models are coming to the same question, and there's so much commonality there. So I suppose, you know, in looking at all those different 4 pillars of the eco village, some of them, I guess we've had a bit more practice perhaps with the environmental and the cultural and the social. When it comes to the economic pillar, it's such a tricky challenge. Eilean, we still aren't seeing the slides.
You're not seeing the slides yet?
No, we're seeing
you.
I'm
sorry. I thought you were.
Yes,
sorry.
I thought maybe you looked as though you thought you'd achieved it.
Yes, I did. I did think that.
Looking too relaxed.
Yes. Okay. I'm looking nervous again.
So,
sorry, guys.
So that's just down at the bottom row. Share screen.
Yep.
And then selecting from the options where you see your PowerPoint presentation.
Yep. Sorry, I
think
think you're gonna see them.
You've got it. You've got it.
That's
well
it.
done.
Great. So that's the 4 pillars that I was talking about from the Global Eco Village Network. And now we'll go to the next slide. So what we're talking about today is the economy. And so why is the economy important? And well, I think, can you go to the next slide, please, Eilean? I think we all are aware here that the current system, the current economic system that we have is eroding the environment because there is no accountability to other stakeholders. The system, I wonder why the slide's not advancing.
I know. I'm not too sure.
If you click your mouse, that might help.
Well, Eileen's sharing, so it's not going to.
Oh, sorry, Eilean. You click your mouse, sometimes that helps. Otherwise, you might just, no, Eilean, yeah. Otherwise, Eilean, you might, if you escape out of presenter mode.
Yeah, I think I'll have to do this again. Sorry, guys. It was working so nicely before.
Yes, it worked in the trial. It's very strange.
It's in it now. It's not wanting to work for some ungodly reason. I am so sorry, Rafaele.
Frustrating.
Well, we'd like to think that the theme of this conference was a work in progress, and
yes.
And so is it for us all, adapting to Zoom and to share screen and
Megan, there's someone new in the waiting room. I think Melinda's just entered.
There we go. Try once more, Eilean, and if we can't get it, then we might
I could try. I could share my screen. Shall I share?
I'm a bit worried about your bandwidth, Rafaele.
Oh, yeah.
Because you are cutting out here and there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I'm going to keep talking anyway, and you'll just have to catch up with me when you get it up there, Eilean.
Go for it.
The problem with the current economic system is it's eroding the environment. There's no accountability to other stakeholders apart from the financial ones. And it assumes infinite resources. That is the assumption behind our economic model. And that's why we're destroying the planet. And as we know, there is no planet B, so we can't continue in this manner. So in our education business at NENA, which is called Collective Know-How, we ask the question, what financial model will demonstrate a real difference? We really need to demonstrate a difference with the financial model that we're using for our businesses at NENA, and particularly this business, whose role it is exactly to walk our talk. And we have to demonstrate that in the very model that we're using. And then we also ask the question, who should benefit from the education business? Is it just to be whoever's, that's good, Eilean, next slide, orange one, thank you. So we don't just want it to be one person that's running the business or one small group that's running the business. Thank you, that's the right slide. Who do we want to benefit when we run this business at NENA Eco Village? And for an eco village where we're very collective, it's a really important question. So then we came across a model. It's called the Fair Shares model. Yes, go to the next slide, please. And ever since we found this model, we have just been riveted, as in, wow, this is so exciting. So the Fair Shares model was put forward. We discovered it first through Graham Boyd, who's the founder of Evolute 6, and also some great work by Rory Ridley-Duff, co-founder of the Fair Shares Association. And Graham Boyd said, Fair Shares is a model that is built for regenerative business. And because of that, it seemed suitable to what we're doing at NENA, and we have been doing a lot of work and are really looking at adopting and trialing this model. So how is it different to business as usual? Next slide. So in businesses today, the trouble is shareholders hold 100% of votes. They hold 100% of equity, and they hold 100% of profit, because as Christine pointed out, this capital is the only capital that's really acknowledged or valued, the financial capital. And the other stakeholders who have other important inputs, both inputs and takeouts from the business, are just ignored. They're disenfranchised. As Graham says, in business today, the only group that has the right to engage in governance and has share of capital gain and profit surplus are the investors. They're the only ones who count. So the Fair Shares model is different. So when we look at the next slide, we see what generally happens to the other stakeholders. So in the standard model that we have today, the executives manipulate for their own gain, the staff are overworked and underpaid, the founders and vision holders are excluded, customers are ripped off, suppliers are squeezed, the local economy is silenced, and the environment is destroyed. We don't want that. What is different in Fair Shares? Next slide, please. So Fair Shares puts all the stakeholders inside the company so that everyone's needs can be equitably represented. In Fair Shares, we move from the paradigm of shareholder ownership to stakeholder governance. So everyone is part of that governance model. And we replace the rights of ownership with the mantle of stewardship, a very different concept, stewardship instead of ownership. That's a fundamental change of the game. As Graham Boyd says, it's stupid to think those who put the most money in are the best people to steer the company wisely into the future, because what are they going to be looking for? Their own profit gain, that's all. And yet other stakeholders will be looking for other things. There are other needs in this picture. And we like this cartoon. If I can read it, it says, in a sociocratic organisation, everyone is in the same boat in terms of compensation based on profits and losses. Now, sociocracy is the method of governance we use at NENA Eco Village. So we're applying that as well as applying the Fair Shares model, and the two work very well together. And yes, it's all in. Everybody's needs count, everybody's contribution counts. So let's go to the next slide. And how am I going for time? Not too bad, good. So, oh no, I am actually probably, I have to hurry up, I think. Okay, no one is left out. Every voice counts, communities are cared for, the environment is sustained, workers are nurtured, all needs are balanced fairly, and therefore no one is blatantly mistreated. So this is the difference we see when we use the fair shares model. So let's look at the next slide, which is the actual structure of the model. What is the setup? And this is what Graham calls the fair shares mix deck. And so here we see several of the stakeholders on the left. That's the stewards, labour, the user, the investor. That's an example of some of the stakeholders. And then we've got these three columns, which are the three different types of reward and input. So we've got voting weight, we've got capital gain, and we've got profit share. So with a standard business model, 100% of voting weight, capital gain, and profit share is held by and awarded to the financial investors. But with the fair shares mix deck, this changes. So some of the voting weight is carried by labour. They get some of the capital gain and they get some of the profit share. And the users have some input and some contribution there. And if you look at the investor, which is the bottom row, they only have 12 to 24% of the voting weight. They get 50% of capital gain, not 100%, and 35% of profit share. So it's being shared out a bit more evenly. And the great thing with the mixed deck is you can turn these dials up or down. So it can be amended as time goes on. It can be different for every organisation. And these decisions would be made by the AGM or the general decision-making circle in a sociocratic organisation, or whatever circle we decide will be making these decisions for this enterprise. So let's look at the next slide, which is where we asked ourselves, the first question we asked, well, who are the stakeholders in our education business, collective know-how, CKH, and which stakeholders do we want to consider? So first of all, we have every member of Narara Eco Village. So Narara Eco Village itself, which we call NEB for short, will be one of the stakeholders and will be benefiting from the enterprise. Then we have our workers in collective know-how, marketing, admin, and presenters. Then we have the founders who've set up the enterprise. We have the students who are our visitors to the village often, or it might be members. We have volunteers who help out with the courses. We have the local wider community represented by the Narara Eco Living Network, NELN. We have the environment, the birds, frogs, butterflies, and ecosystems, a very important stakeholder in anything that happens on this planet. And finally, we have the investors as one of the stakeholder groups. So let's go to the next slide. So our aim in doing this is that all NEV members, all members of the Eco Village will feel that it is our business. They won't think, oh, that's that group, but it's our business because the whole Eco Village benefits. That all share in the rewards of what this enterprise does. And therefore, all will be willing to contribute skills. All voices will be represented. There'll be shared work opportunities in this business and shared hosting, therefore, and welcoming visitors because they are the visitors for all of us as we're all benefiting. And so these are the steps we went through in the process of deciding, okay, we're going to try this model. These are some of the parameters we're going to apply. And I'm going to hand over to Eilean now and let her present more of a brief overview of the key concepts of the fair shares model. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafaele, and apologies to everyone for the slight technological problems. I think I've settled down now. Anyway, so excellent. So Rafaele has given the example of how we're using this system or trialing it with collective know-how education enterprise. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of these two models, these two compatible models. So we've got the fair shares model that was developed by Rory Ridley Duff, as Rafaele already mentioned, and it's a very comprehensive business model for building multi-stakeholder enterprises, social enterprises. He based it on the Mondragon Cooperative in the north of Spain, that's been around for many years, and the Solidarity Cooperative movement. So that's Ridley Duff, and he's located in Sheffield, in one of the universities in Sheffield. And he's got this, him and his colleagues have got this Fair Shares Association, which I recommend you to look at their website because it's full of resources, and they use the Creative Commons to share these resources. So they're really practicing what they're suggesting. Fair Shares Commons is an idea that Boyd then came up with. He builds on the Fair Shares model, and he includes his own work, which was on developing free enterprises or enterprises that are held within the commons. And he bases this concept on the work of Elinor Ostrom and how natural resources. Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in 2009 for economics, and her work focused on the commons, on natural ecosystems, natural resources that are managed by groups of people. She actually refutes the tragedy of the commons idea. And we spoke a lot about the commons yesterday afternoon in the plenary. So that's Boyd's work. So just to give you a little bit of a definition, Boyd says, and by the way, there are links at the bottom of all of these slides for you to have a look at later on. So he says, in a fair shares company, as Rafaele has said, all stakeholders share the power to govern the company and the wealth generated. So all stakeholders work together to find a way of meeting all needs, including those of society and the planet. Then Boyd goes on to say, add in freedom from any concept of property, where the company cannot be bought or sold. So it's not like a private, it's almost like a commons company, and ensure that stakeholders are stewards of the company in the interest of future generations, and you get a fair shares commons enterprise. And I'll talk a little bit about later on about his adaptive organizations. Okay, so again, as Rafaele said, it's a multi-stakeholder enterprise. So you don't only just consider your owners and your investors, it's the staff, the suppliers, the customers, investors, yes, you do acknowledge that they're there, and also nature, and this very important, and even the city where your company is in, and this very important concept of stewardship. And he equates the stewards as the trustees in a trust, and they are obliged to abide by the principles and values of the fair shares company. And when there is sort of a general meeting, they have to vote to abide by those principles and values. So very briefly, here are the 5 values and principles of a fair shares company. So you've got, on the left-hand side, you've got the values and principles. On the right-hand side, you've got 6 key questions that really make those principles so that they are concrete questions that you need to ask about your enterprise, your business. But the 5 values and principles are wealth and power sharing with all primary stakeholders, specification of social purposes and auditing of social impact. So this concept of auditing, to looking at your company, to reflect at the end of the year. Am I following these social purposes? An ethical review of the choices of the goods and services that you offer, that enterprise offers. An ethical review of the production and retailing processes that enterprise uses. And finally, the social democratic models of ownership, governance, and management that you use in your company.
Thank you, Eilean. Got about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Do you want us to wrap up? Thanks.
You've got 6 forms of wealth. So you've got not only financial and manufacturer wealth, but also you have these companies consider social, human, intellectual, and natural wealth. Okay. Boyd goes on to say it's not only the fair shares commons model that you should look at, you should also look at your individuals, your teams, and your governance structures. And not only that, he goes the other way and he says you can create not only one company, but an ecosystem of these regenerative enterprises. And that's what we're wanting to trial at the Ecovillage. We're starting with collective know-how, our education enterprise, and we then want to see if we can use the same model with some other businesses we're trying to set up: accommodation, food production, sort of a food cafe, and other small businesses that we have. And finally, there's some references at the end of these slides. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, everyone.